Hello everybody and welcome to my channel. Welcome back if you have been here before and watched a few of my videos, or if you've watched a lot of them. And if you're new, then welcome aboard. This week we're doing something a little bit different, and I'm going to be taking you with me as I stroll through the holiday that Mr. Jane and I took last week. We went to Edinburgh, the capital of Scotland, and we had a jolly good time. I'm going to show you a few of the things that we did, explain a little bit more about the history as we go along. If you've been following me on my Instagram, then you might have seen a few of these pictures. If not, then I think you're in for a treat. I really do. Edinburgh's a fantastic place. Don't forget to like this video before you start watching, and if you haven't subscribed already, why not? Please just do it. Okay, so without much more to do, let us get on with the tour. So we flew into Edinburgh Airport, and from above the clouds we descend into the city. It's built just by the River Forth, and as you can see in this picture, there are a couple of bridges, and it's known as the Firth of Forth. You can see the city is surrounded by hills, and the actual castle in the centre of the city is actually built on an extinct volcano. Yes, I know. How amazing is that? And as you can see that from these pictures, it would have been nigh on impossible for anybody to attack that castle from below. No wonder it stood for so long. The changing of the guards is a very popular sight. All the tourists go up there and have a look at that, and as you can see, they're a jolly smart bunch in their kilts and their sporrans and their lovely uniforms. And here's a picture of me not doing very much else apart from decorating the landscape. After we'd been up to the castle, we visited a monument which was put up in 1873 to a little dog. Now, this little dog's name is Greyfriars Bobby, and he was a little terrier whose owner was a police officer or guardsman or night watchman, depending on which story you believe. And when this chap died, Bobby, because he loved his owner so much, spent the next 14 years sitting on his grave. Yep, the local people put up a little shelter for him, and when he died in 1872, but he was 16 by then, they actually buried him in a little piece of unconsecrated ground just outside, literally outside Greyfriars Church, or Greyfriars Kirk as we call it in Scotland. Now, the actual church itself is lovely inside, and the graveyard around it is equally lovely. And as we found out from one of the gentlemen looking after the kirk, there's a lot of Harry Potter fans find themselves up there looking around the graveyard, because apparently J.K. Rowling got her inspiration for some of the names for Harry Potter stories from these actual gravestones. And there are names like McGonagall, and there's even a Tom Riddle, so that's where she got some of those. We also visited the Scottish National Gallery, and this was absolutely marvellous because it meant we saw, and I hadn't expected this because I didn't look it up before we went, we saw a few very, very famous paintings which it's so amazing to see in real life. The first one of which was the Monarch of the Glen by Landseer, which you will probably have seen on the cover of anything from bars of soap to tins of biscuits, I don't know, but it's a beautiful painting and it's large and very impressive. And the other famous painting is called The Skating Minister, and that's either by somebody called Mr. Raeburn or by somebody else. There's a bit of a confusion allegedly about who painted it, but even so, it's a great picture. It's got a lot of verve and movement, and you can get it basically on everything: key rings, handbags, diaries, everything. But it's a lovely picture. Then we went on to the absolutely incredible Frankenstein beer cellar, which I'm just going to put up the pictures and show you because it literally speaks for itself. Other trips that we went on included seeing St Giles Cathedral, which is glorious, absolutely glorious. Some of the windows in there are just, you have to see them to believe them. They're by one of my most favourite artists, Burne-Jones, one of the pre-Raphaelites of whom you'll have heard me speak in relation to my tattoos. But these windows are just glorious. I mean, too glorious to even give you an idea of what they're like without you visiting. Highly recommend a trip to have a look at those. There's all sorts of history in Edinburgh, as I've already said. Everything from the buildings to the street names, which are unusual to say the least. There's lots of little courtyards and stairways and little alleyways and things like that. And amongst all this history is a place I hadn't really found out much about until we went there, and this was Mary King's Close. Now this is a really, really interesting historical tour that you go on. It takes about an hour and you're taken on a tour by a historical character. I think they have, quite a few of them because they interact throughout the tour a couple of times, not all the time. It's not annoying or cringy or anything. But the tour it's basically where people had to live underneath the city. Edinburgh was one of the earliest places where they were building up to 6 stories high as early as the 16th century, and living conditions were not very nice for the people that lived underneath the ground floor. And this tour takes you sort of round the lanes and shows you the rooms where people lived. It also talks about the Black Death in the 17th century. You can see here I have some of the plague doctors on this lovely shirt from 1645, which I bought in the gift shop. And yeah, the different areas that people lived, the tiny narrow passageways where they lived and worked and did their bodily functioning. It was incredibly interesting. Really recommend having a look at that if you ever get the chance. We did also take a bus tour around the city on one of the modern buses. We actually missed this one rather sadly, but if we ever go again I shall do that one and show you what that's like. The weather, well, I'm used to mainly sunshine, but more so looking at the forecast, looking out the window and getting a general idea of what it's going to be like. But in Edinburgh I've never known anything like it. 5 minutes it could be blazing sunshine, 5 minutes pouring with rain. The most changeable weather I've ever had the experience of. So if you are going to Edinburgh, you will need either a Mac or a cagoule or an umbrella or all three. So do take that into account. But even though the weather is quite cool, I did manage to find some giraffes. Well, there we have it. A whistle-stop tour around the city of Edinburgh. There were things that we didn't get to see because they were either too far away and we couldn't get to them, or we just didn't have time. I will say though that the cancellation of our flight home as we just reached the departure gate and the 12 hours that we spent in the airport trying to get home were not the highlight, especially as when we did eventually get back to Gatwick, the trains were also being delayed and cancelled, and instead of getting home at about, I don't know, we hoped to get home something like 5:30 in the afternoon, we actually got home at 2 o'clock the following morning. So apart from that, and vowing never to fly with EasyJet ever again as long as I live in this life or the next, it was a fantastic holiday, and Mr. Jane and I both had an extremely interesting and good time. So if you enjoyed this video, I will remind you to like and subscribe. If you'd like to buy me a coffee to help me get over the trauma of being trapped in an airport with people's children running around and no opportunity to slice them off at the knees, then do buy me a coffee here. And I will see you all very soon. Please take care of those you love, especially if they are non-human. Do kiss your pets for me and tell them I love them. And most of all, everybody, while you're out there, wherever you are in the world, just stay strange, okay? See you next time.